should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time!
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah!
I finished these fights.
Give me a hell yeah!
Top Rope Nation.
Learn to love it. It's the best thing going today.
Welcome to Top Rope Nation, a weekly podcast that tries to make sense of this crazy world that is pro wrestling. If you're tuning in on YouTube, guys, hit that subscribe button, mash the like button. It would help us more than you know if you're listening on one of the various podcasting platforms, whether it's iTunes, we are on TuneIn Radio, Spotify, pretty much everywhere. Likewise, hit that subscribe button, leave us a rating. We would greatly appreciate it. We think tonight we're going to have a little bit bigger audience than usual due to one of our guests we have joining us here tonight, which we will get to in just a minute. But we'd love to have you back. So if you've never tuned in to Top Rope Nation before, it's a weekly podcast. We usually put this thing out on Friday mornings and get you all set for the weekend, talking all things pro wrestling. So with that being said, my name is Ryan Drosty of comicbook.com, and I am your usual host here of Top Rope Nation. Normally I have two guys joining us. One of them's out sick, so Justin Joint, feel better soon, but I am joined by my other trusty sidekick, Mr. Kyle Ross, out there in chilly Cleveland, Ohio. Kyle, what's going on tonight?
Everything you say is right, Ryan.
Everything I say is right. That's a callback to an off-the-air conversation we were just having about Kyle's contrarian takes. Always trying to get the better of me here on Top Rope Nation. No, seriously, Kyle, how's it going? It's been freezing here in the upper Midwest and the Midwest. Getting out of the house much these days?
I did, although it does not look like it, I did go to the gym yesterday. Other than that, no, I have not been outside the house in 2 days.
I got outside the house for the very first time today since Sunday because it's been like negative 50 degrees wind chill here in Iowa pretty much all week long, as you guys have probably been hearing on the news. The whole Midwest is Arctic blast right now.
That's cold if you don't follow the weather.
Yeah, it's way colder than usual. But I think our guest joining us here tonight is probably a lot wiser than me and you, Kyle, because I think he's in a lot better weather, a much warmer climate. He's an Emmy award-winning broadcaster, happens to have a very popular YouTube channel, which has a big focus on pro wrestling. Of late, he's been working with Cricket Wireless, traveling the country with WWE, interviewing some of the biggest names in the business. So we're really excited to have Mr. Chris Van Vliet with us here on Top Rope Nation. What's going on, Chris?
Ryan, Kyle, thanks for having me on. And yes, it is much warmer here versus there. But I want to say I am Canadian. I am from Toronto. I lived in Cleveland before moving to Florida, so I have so much empathy for you guys. I'm sorry. It was quote unquote cold here this morning because it was 55 degrees.
Oh man. Well, you know what we're going through though. As Bill Clinton once said, you feel our pain. You know what's going down here.
I feel your pain. And I've been living here now for 4 years, and I will say that I'm very glad to get away from the cold and the winter, but I can empathize with you guys. I know what you're going through.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be 45 here on Sunday. It's a swing of like almost 80 degrees, which is
so you're good.
Crazy.
You're good.
Yeah, hopefully all this snow, we get rid of some of it on Sunday. Yeah. But no, you were just in a really warm climate. You were in the middle of the desert last weekend, Chris. You went to the Rumble in Phoenix, and how was that trip for you?
Yeah, that was incredible. I was there for 4-ish days, got there Thursday. We did some stuff with Charlotte Flair on Friday. I hosted a live stream with Sasha Banks and Bailey on Saturday, did some other interviews at Access, and then went to the Rumble on Sunday. I had tickets to NXT, and then I was texting with Dolph Ziggler, and he said, hey, if you want to do an interview, why don't you come by my house right now? And I'm like, okay. And the original plan was Dolph Ziggler was going to interview me. I've done like 15 interviews with him. He's such a great guy, but he has so much going on right now with his contract talks and everything else. I said, I know you were going to interview me and it was going to be fun, but I need to talk to you and figure out what's going on. And I don't know if you've seen the interview, but he says he's on a hiatus from WWE. He told me he wasn't going to be at the Rumble.
Yeah,
and then he showed up at number 28.
What a worker.
I honestly, maybe he worked us. I don't know, but I would have to think that he didn't actually have any plans to be in the Rumble. I think that he was just planning to do his comedy show that night. And I'm like, well, you're going to be on Raw, right? He's like, oh, actually, I'm flying to California on Monday, so that's not happening.
Wow. Yeah, I saw your interview with him, and then when he showed up in the Rumble, I was kind of surprised. But
Yeah.
I checked out the Bailey Sasha Banks segment that you did too, where you did kind of like the newlywed game with him. That was pretty entertaining.
Yeah, that was fun. I mean, when you're doing an interview with a corporate company like that, and they've got a WWE person standing off to the side, basically like nodding or shaking their head at your questions, they had to stay. Actually, every question for that interview had to be completely pre-approved. So it was fun, but we couldn't touch on any of the stuff that I think would be interesting, like like the wardrobe malfunction that Sasha had a couple weeks ago.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, they run a pretty tight ship there with those kinds of things.
Yeah,
I've heard.
What a trip that is, man! Some guy just looking over your shoulder, just nodding.
Yeah,
like no, cut it out, man.
Yeah, like, and they don't like when you go straight to the wrestlers, or sorry, the superstar. I can't even call them wrestlers if we're talking about WWE. They don't like when you go straight to the talent and ask them for an interview. They want you to go to the PR person first, who then goes to the talent, to then goes back to the PR person, then goes back to you. So they don't like when you skirt around them like that.
Yeah.
Was Dean Ambrose, are you thinking of leaving, an approved question on Sunday night?
Yeah, that would have been good, right?
Yeah.
I gotta wonder if that's a work. I mean, I can't think of another situation in at least my history of watching wrestling where WWE has come out 3-4 months ahead of time and said, yep, this person's leaving. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me.
A lot of people are talking about that. Yeah, we're going to get to that later on because it is an interesting question. Is this real? Is it not? WWE has been a lot more open with the media in the last couple of years than they used to be.
Yes.
But there is still that. Yeah, they've never really done that before. So
I think that maybe if they say it on their website, they're getting out ahead of it in front of the dirt sheets. Maybe that's their reasoning, but it just seems a little strange that they're this open to it instead of not commenting at all.
Right, especially with like such a big name too, who's got time left.
And especially with all this talk about AEW, and it times out well that he would show up maybe for their first show, perhaps for whatever they have going on after that. I don't know. I guess we'll find out in the next couple of months, but it just seems strange.
Yeah, a little strange. I agree. Chris, we did want to talk a little bit about you before we get back to Dean Ambrose, because like I said, you have a pretty popular YouTube channel. People know of you here in the wrestling community. You've got a big following on Twitter, Instagram, and on your own channel, you don't talk about yourself too much because that would be a little awkward. So I wanted to ask you about yourself a little bit, because some of your fans, obviously, that tune into all the videos you post on YouTube, they're tuning in to hear about you a little bit. So what's your history with wrestling? You said you're from Canada. How did you become a fan? How'd you get involved in the wrestling industry with making the videos and the YouTube channel? Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, and to your original point there, no one's tuning into any of my interviews to hear me talk. So that's why I keep my talking as minimal as possible in those interviews. But yeah, I've been a wrestling fan my whole life, like you guys, I'm sure, like everyone else is watching this. I remember watching at my grandfather's house. It would be like Saturday morning and wrestling would come on, and I'd be wrestling a pillow or something like that, like every other kid does. And then the Attitude Era, man, that just got me hooked. I was in high school at the time, 15, 16, 17 years old. During the Attitude Era, I was on the high school wrestling team. And I remember trying to give guys pedigrees during the middle of like amateur wrestling matches because I was so into it. I was a backyard wrestler. My backyard wrestling name was Chris Sharp. I did the Swanton Bomb as a finisher.
Kyle, were you a backyard wrestler, by the way?
No,
What's
but
that?
I'm saying that no, I was not. But I was going to tell Chris the pedigree is one hell of a move to do an amateur because, as we know, no one gets up from the pedigree.
Well, it's also highly illegal in amateur wrestling.
I believe the law says you have to lay down for at least 5 minutes after being hit with one pedigree. So
it was my goal. I wanted to be a pro wrestler, and I actually went to a wrestling school in Toronto. There was Rob Fuego was the guy that was he was El Fuego in WWE for a little while. Angel Williams was there, and Tracy Brooks was training there at the time when I was there, and it was just tough. Like I was in college and commuting an hour each way to go to wrestling school, and it was like I got to decide what's more important here, getting an education or being a pro wrestler. And it's also $250 a month, which when you're in college, that's a lot of drinking money, like a ton of drinking money. So I had to make the decision, and the decision was I was going to focus on school. I actually went to Eric Young's wrestling school for a little while too. And my first day at Eric Young's wrestling school, which was only like half an hour from my college, a dude broke his arm. And Eric's like, this doesn't happen all the time. You got to understand this was an accident. And I'm like, no, I get it. I completely get it. So that was it for me. Like I really wanted to get into, I wanted to be a pro wrestler, and I watched everything. I watched Monday Night Raw would repeat on Tuesday, and I would rewatch that. And I watched Thunder and SmackDown and Nitro and ECW and Metal and Jacked and Heat. I watched everything, and I would tape it and I would rewatch it. I was a crazy fan like that. And then when I got into broadcasting and kind of chased after that goal, I had the opportunity to interview wrestlers when they would come to town, and you would say, oh yeah, Raw's in town, and here's whoever it is in town to talk about it. And you'd only air like 15, 20 seconds of that interview. But I was doing 10, 15, 20-minute interviews, actually talking about stuff that I cared about just personally. I wanted answers to it. And I kind of realized one day, like, why don't I just put these up on my YouTube channel? And my YouTube channel at the time had like 5 subscribers and like 1,000 views total. And I put up this interview in 2011 with The Miz. He was throwing the first pitch out at Progressive Field in Cleveland. And by the way, you should look that clip up. The Miz can like throw like 90 miles an hour. It's incredibly impressive. So I do this interview with him, and CM Punk had just had the pipe bomb. And I just said, what do you think of it? And he gave me this comment that he thought it was the best thing in wrestling since the Attitude Era. I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. Put the interview up, woke up the next morning and had 6,000 views. And I'm like, what happened? That's 6,000 views. I never get that many views. And then the next day I woke up and had 36,000 views. And I'm like, wow, I think we're onto something here. And someone had randomly found it somehow and shared it on the dirt sheets. And the next thing you know, the video, at least in the little world that I was in at that time with 5 subscribers, went a little bit viral. And my page kind of exploded from there. And I thought, all right, I'm on to something here. So anytime a wrestler would come to town, it wasn't that often, but if it was 4, 5, 6 times a year, I would post the Raw interview and kind of went from there. And then last year, I made this decision that I was going to really make a go at this. And I've been driving around, I've been flying around. If someone's going to give me access to do an interview, I'll do it. Partly because I'm a super fan. I just want to hang out and meet these wrestlers and learn about it. And also partly because, it's really cool to get this great content. And we just basically have a conversation and we throw it up there and people can take little bits out of it that they want.
Nice. I was going to ask you if you had a favorite show that you attended, as a fan over the years. And when you started talking about the area you were from, instantly wondered if you went to WrestleMania 18 or 6 or anything like that.
WrestleMania 18, my favorite match of all time, too. Rock Hogan. That was so amazing. It was so electric seeing that reaction in the crowd because you were supposed to cheer for Rock and everyone was cheering for Hogan. And still to this day, when I watch the opening 2-3 minutes of that match with the stare down and Hogan pushing down Rock and flexing it up, I get goosebumps every single time still. I'm getting goosebumps talking about it right now. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great event. I think I was a senior in high school when that show happened. So we're all about the same age on here.
Yeah, all right. I'm 35.
Yeah, I just turned 35.
Okay, well, there we go.
A couple weeks ago. Yeah. So, do you have a favorite interview you've done over the years? You said like around 2011 is when you kind of started getting after it. Any favorite ones that stick out from your YouTube channel at all?
Like Rock was #1 on my list for the longest time. Like he was just, I'm very fortunate with my job to interview a lot of celebrities too. And Rock was always at the top of my list, someone I wanted to interview for years and years and years. And he was always doing these movie interviews, but I wasn't getting invited to do them. So my friends would, my colleagues would do these, and I'd be so jealous. And then WWE was coming to Cleveland for, I think it was Raw. Yeah, they were coming to Cleveland for Raw. And I was in touch with WWE and I said, whoever you can give me, I will take an interview with whoever. Just let me know. And they called me and said, all right, you're going to be interviewing The Rock on Monday. And I'm like, what? Not only am I getting The Rock, but I'm getting The Rock in a wrestling setting. And I look back at it, and it was an okay interview, but it was just kind of for me, like it was that checking that off the bucket list. And now I've interviewed The Rock, a handful of times, and he's super gracious and funny and kind and charismatic. He's everything you want him to be. Although as his career goes on, I think he wants to talk about wrestling less and less. And I still want to talk about wrestling like the whole time.
Yeah. Now his daughter's training, so people are going to continue asking, what's going on with her?
I see his Rock lives not far from where I live in Fort Lauderdale. The Rock lives in a giant house about 20-30 minutes from here. And I've actually seen his mom at local wrestling shows, Ada. And she was talking about how her granddaughter, The Rock's daughter, wants to be the first ever 4th generation superstar. So who knows?
Well, Chris, next time we have you on the show, I'm going to expect you to go knock on his door, like with your phone, and I want you to live stream so we can get The Rock on Top Rope Nation. No pressure or anything.
I'll get you to the gate that leads into the community that leads to the gate where The Rock's house is.
Do you have any funny stories, by the way, about like any interviews that didn't go as planned or anything unexpected that happened besides Dolph Ziggler allegedly working you the other day?
I had an interview with the way they used to do interviews at Access was they would have the media person cut the autograph line, and then we'd have a minute or two to do the interview, which you can't get very good stuff in a minute or two. But they basically stop the line, you'd go to their table and you'd stick a mic in their face and ask them like 2 questions, and that'd be the end of it. Well, I guess Dolph Ziggler had his line interrupted one too many times already that day. So when I stepped up on stage with him, the crowd just instantly started booing. Like I was so over as a heel. It was crazy. So the crowd's booing like crazy, and Dolph kind of goes to the front of the stage and says, "Hey, all right, give us 1 minute." And then he turns to me and goes, "Make it 2." So as soon as he said that, the crowd started counting down from 60. Like 60, 59, 58, 57, 56. And I'm still trying to do the interview while they're doing this. And then it gets to 0, and just like the Royal Rumble, they all go, eh, and then they start booing so loud that we couldn't continue the interview. That's up on my channel. You should check that out. So that was an interesting moment. Brutus the Barber Beefcake is not the kindest interview. Yeah, they were pretty short and abrupt answers. I don't know if I'd want to ever interview him again.
Was it in a toll booth or no?
Although I did have a fun moment with him. I asked, he had the clippers with him, and he did clip a little bit of my hair, which was a fun moment as a fan. But the interview itself was, not awesome.
Well, there's probably not that many people these days looking for a Brutus the Barber interview, so you probably don't have to seek him out again. You don't have to do that again.
And it's funny, now that I've been doing the YouTube channel for a while, I can kind of see which interviews are going to do better than other ones. Like any current WWE person is going to do great, but like the vintage people like just don't do that well. Like Luke Bushwhacker, it's not a lot of views. Brutus the Barber Beefcake, not a ton of views. But then you get someone like Sasha Bailey who didn't talk about anything really newsworthy, and the interview does great.
Yeah. You had a pretty big one here a couple weeks ago with Chris Jericho, right around the time of the AEW launch there in Jacksonville. I think about a half-hour interview on your YouTube channel. That's one a lot of people have been talking about. Anything out of the ordinary about interviewing Chris Jericho?
So number one, it's so cool that people watch these interviews, like, because you kind of do them in a bubble. Like, I don't know if too many people know this, but I record them on my iPhone because the iPhones have like incredible broadcast quality video, broadcast quality audio. I have a microphone though too. So it's kind of weird that it's you and this person and one of my buddies holding an iPhone. And then you kind of realize that when you upload this, that like all these people end up seeing it. So I was like in the bathroom at the Royal Rumble and people are like, dude, I loved your Chris Jericho interview. And I'm like, yeah, all right. That's so cool. So I knew he was coming to a city kind of like, it's about a 4-hour drive from me. So I knew he was coming to Florida, but it was going to be a 4-hour drive each way. And through a mutual friend, I had his number from a previous interview that I'd done. And I texted him and said, all right, hey, if you're going to be in Ocala, I said, are you going to be in Ocala this weekend? And he said, yeah, do you want to do something on your show? And I'm like, yeah, yes, I do. And he goes, all right, well, come on up. We'll figure something out. So I get there and I text him. I said, I'm here. And he goes, I am too. And I'm like, I'm in a parking lot. I'm like, where are you? And he goes, I'm in the black car. So I walk up to a random black car and I'm like, is Chris in there? And they're like, no. And I'm like, sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. So I call him. I'm like, where are you? And he goes, oh, I'm in the car 2 cars over. So I get in and I sit in the back seat with him. He goes, why don't we just do the interview in here? Because if I get out, that line's going to go crazy. I said, yeah, no problem. So we kicked his driver out, who just ended up walking around for a little while. My buddy, the camera guy, sits in the driver's seat, kind of like over his shoulder with the camera. And we sat in the back seat and chatted it up. And he's great. He's willing to talk about anything.
Yeah, that was a great interview. Definitely.
No,
you guys...
well, thank you. The fact that he was just willing to like, yeah, sure, let's do it. I mean, that was huge for me.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys need to check it out. So we'll have Chris's YouTube channel linked here in the description here on YouTube, or if you're listening via audio, the episode description, I'll link that. But like we said, a lot of good interviews. He's got years of history interviewing wrestling talent on there, so we definitely recommend you check it out. Chris, we're definitely going to have you stick around tonight, if that's all right, as we discuss kind of what's going on in wrestling, because this has been a really newsworthy week in pro wrestling. It's kind of crazy how much has gone on in 2019 already this year. Just having another company that hasn't even had a show yet, but another company out there that's offering comparable pay, maybe even better benefits than WWE. It's making things really interesting. I mean, like you said, we all grew up in the Attitude Era and watching WWF and WCW, and North American wrestling since that point in time, it's been interesting, but not as interesting as it was back then, you know, and not to sound like an old man or anything, but like if you're a younger fan, you have no idea what it was like in the 90s when you never knew who would show up on each other's show. And now like we're getting to a point where we might kind of have a thread of that happening. We saw this week the Dean Ambrose story. We saw it happen with Hideo Itami. We had other people asking for releases recently. The Revival, Mike Bennett, Maria Kanellis, all of them supposedly trying to get out of their deal. So it's been a wild ride here in 2019 already. We were talking about Dean Ambrose a second ago and whether that's a work, what's really going on. But if you don't know the story, basically Ambrose kind of was eliminated from the Rumble and unceremoniously eliminated. It wasn't that big of a deal. He was on Raw
noticed it though. Like I said to my buddy when I was watching, I was like, whew, how the mighty have fallen here.
Yeah, because it wasn't a big deal when he got thrown out. It was just kind of like, oh, there goes Dean Ambrose.
I said that about him and last year's winner. Shinsuke was just thrown out with no story behind it.
Yeah, and that's another thing we got to talk about is Tuesday night and what happened with him. So yeah, and Kyle is always a Shinsuke Nakamura critic on the show, by the way.
Shinsuke was given such little effort, he probably didn't even notice that he was eliminated.
I got my prized possession behind me. You can't quite see. It's an NXT poster. Right at the top, there's a Shinsuke Nakamura autograph. And Kyle's big criticism of Shinsuke is always that he takes the night off, always at house.
I was going to say, that autograph was probably the most effort he gave that night.
Wow.
I mean, I don't want to drag the guy too much, but it's true. It was an NXT house show. The effort was not quite what you would see on TV. His run in WWE hasn't been what I would have hoped, as a big Nakamura fan going back to New Japan. I got to wonder what's happening with him as his contract comes due here pretty soon too.
I've never seen a company like this AEW. Have you? I mean, they're just rewriting the rules. They rewrite a show.
It is pretty crazy.
And honestly, that is the most interesting thing. We're 4 months away from their first show. They don't have an announced TV deal, and everyone thinks that they're going to take on WWE. It just seems. Let's not put the cart before the horse here.
Thank you. This is a good guest that we have on this program, Ryan. This is somebody who obviously knows this sport.
I haven't watched it, but the latest being the Elite, wasn't there like a countdown timer on it again? I'm wondering if that's going to be their TV announcement. I think it was like next week or some point. So I don't know. We'll see. But once they announce that thing, they're going to have to be announcing show after show after show, because it's supposedly going to be a weekly 2-hour show, and we're just a few months away, and they got to book the arenas.
I'm thinking that they announced the TV deal in the next 2 months, maybe. And then, but then where does this Double or Nothing air? Does that air? Does it stream? Does that air on the network that they're going to be on? These are all questions we have no answers to.
Yeah, so it is crazy. Like Kyle was saying, you haven't really ran a show. They had the All In show, I guess, kind of like the guys involved, but ROH was pulling a lot of the strings on that show.
Yeah.
So they don't even own the TV rights to it, from what I had heard.
Nope.
So Yeah, I don't know. It's very unique, but a lot of big money behind this organization, and that's what it comes down to.
And as we all know, as soon as the quote-unquote underutilized Dean Ambrose shows up and stops doing quote-unquote hokey shit, I mean, this industry has changed forever. I mean...
Look, someone raised a really good point on the weekend, and I couldn't agree more. They said that if AEW wants to compete with WWE, they need to make their TV product look like WWE. And I don't mean that the matches need to look like WWE. I mean that the quality of what they're putting out needs to look like quality. It can't look like, no offense to Ring of Honor, but Ring of Honor's TV quality doesn't look like WWE's. It looks like it's in a smaller audience with less production value. So if AEW wants to compete at the same level, it needs to look as good.
Yeah, that's a great point, because that's, the number one barrier of entry. WCW, despite all the gaffes that happened, was actually run, by a television company. They were run by TBS, people, a television company. But, when you look at these, that's been the number one, why no one's been able to compete with WWE, because the quote unquote masses, there's a certain aesthetic that has to exist, to have mass appeal. And no one has been able to do that since 2001.
So if that can happen, it's going to be a real interesting conversation.
Yeah, that was always the big knock on Ring of Honor, is like their lighting was really bad.
Yeah.
I think they improved it a little bit in recent years, but it still doesn't look like a WWE show. And now with all the guys leaving Ring of Honor, what becomes of Ring of Honor too? I mean, that's another tangent on this story. So
again, AEW wins again.
They win without even having a show.
I've never seen a company like this. It's unbelievable. Everybody's going.
I've never even seen the company, so
no other promotion will even have a mid card, because all of their unhappy wrestlers will just go to AEW.
Automatically be main eventers too.
Yes.
Well, I'm looking to work for a wrestling company, so if AEW is listening, I might as well go there too.
Guys, we'll do the official podcast of AEW. We'll even change the name. We love the name Top Rope Nation, but we will change the name if you guys are looking for a podcast.
I've heard of the co-opted wrestling media, but this is just going too far.
Okay, maybe we'd keep the name Top Rope Nation. It's a damn good name. What do you guys think though about this Dean Ambrose story? Supposedly he told him, and he was offered a big money contract from what I was hearing and reading today.
Million downside.
Yeah, he told him he's not interested. He's got 3 months left on his deal. It is very odd for WWE with a guy with 3 months left of television time to say, yeah, he's not sticking around, especially for a guy who's, held all the titles that he's had, and he's always going to be associated with the top of the card, through Seth Rollins right now and the WrestleMania build, the Shield being one of the most popular stables of all time. Kyle, what do you think about this? You think it's legit? You think Dean Ambrose is leaving, or you think it's a work?
Yeah, I think it's legit. But, it is wrestling, so I understand. Anyone who's been a wrestling fan for any length of time, there's always that thing in the back of your mind, oh, is it a work? Because that's just what being a wrestling fan is. I'm kind of glad some of the language you used when introducing this issue about how Dean's held all the championships, has been in the main event picture. Because, I kind of joked about it about 2 minutes ago. I think it's kind of fresh that we're referring to him as, quote, the underutilized Dean Ambrose. There are a lot of guys in WWE who are underutilized. Dean Ambrose is not one of them. He's always had a pretty solid spot on the card. The reaction to this has been, somewhat painfully predictable. Again, I've kind of made fun of it. Oh, WWE screws up another one. AEW bound. This industry's changing. To me, any excitement over this and the possibility of him going to AEW is something I think I spoke about last week on the show, where freedom of movement is something that we've lost since WCW. You kind of touched on that earlier, that, it was exciting to see who would show up when, where, bouncing back and forth in the Monday Night Wars era. Dean, I think this is a case, any frustration Dean may have is just simply, he's been with this company now for over 6 years. And he has won all the titles. Now, has he always been booked the best? I don't think so. I think, he was pretty hot in early 2016, and most fans, I think, would agree that Brock Lesnar feud killed him dead. I also don't think his current stuff, has been that great. The heel turn did not work. The match with Rollins at TLC was not good. And, also doing him no favors is that maybe vis-a-vis the company, I think a lot of people view him as number 3 among the Shield. Roman's always going to be pushed. Seth is clearly being pushed. So, maybe that's hurt him a little bit. But, I think they should not have broken up the Shield when they did. I think that was a mistake with the benefit of hindsight. But has he been booked the best? No. Is his body, his body of work? Let's examine Ambrose, the performer. Everyone's getting all excited about this guy. Who's in AEW? Meltzer even talked about, he's friends with Jericho. Do we remember that Ambrose Jericho match from 2016 in that cage? That was one of the worst big matches in WWE the last 3 years. So, I was texting with a buddy just last week. I asked him, what's the best Dean Ambrose match? And, Justin, that I did the same thing too. And we came up with a couple, but, I just think for me, if he wants to go, that's great. And I think any benefit, it's not like if he goes to AEW, let's say, and succeeds, I don't necessarily think that's a knock against WWE. I just think it's freedom of movement. I'm old enough to remember like Ravishing Rick Rude, a successful wrestler, a famous wrestler, someone we all know listening to this podcast. He leaves WWF, goes to WCW, and by the way, was actually better in WCW. Nobody in 1991 was saying, "Oh, WWE just doesn't know how to book these guys." No one was saying it. Like, to me, it's just, and it goes to people aren't used to it. In the 80s and 90s, people moved around all the time. 6 years is a long time to be in one company.
Yeah, he like you were saying, he's won a lot of titles. He's always been around the main event scene. I was saying that a second ago too. I can understand the creative frustration for him. It's funny because I always use that term hokey with Dean Ambrose matches in particular, and I don't know if he was encouraged to use like the moveset that he was, but I always found like that rebound thing he would do off the middle rope, like hokey. I always use that term. So to hear him using the term hokey about or allegedly using the term hokey about his run with WWE is kind of funny, and but. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I thought if I think back to when he came in with the Shield, I remember everyone talking about him as being like the next Roddy Piper, and
Harry Funk.
Yep. And when he was a baby face, I always thought like I really want to see this guy as a heel. The baby face thing is just it's goofy. They're trying to make him funny. I want to see what this guy can do as a serious heel. And like you alluded to, Kyle, the heel run has been a little disappointing. Chris, what do you think creatively about Dean Ambrose's time with WWE over the last 6 years or so?
Well, I don't know what value there is for WWE pre-announcing that he'll be leaving. I just don't see, from a marketing standpoint or a PR standpoint, what the value is there. If it is in fact actually happening, this I feel is unprecedented, and maybe it's setting the tone for what will end up being the future in professional wrestling. I don't know, but I'm with you guys. I can't think back to a Dean Ambrose match that stole the show or was the best match on the card. But this is part of a bigger discussion. It's do you stay in WWE and make a whole bunch of money, or do you go somewhere else where you have the creative freedom to be the wrestler that you want to be? And I would have to think that this is tied into his return. He had so much excitement around his return. Everyone was talking about it. People loved his new look. And then what was it, like a week or 2 or 3 later, it just all fell flat and no one seemed to care anymore. So it must be tied into that. But if I'm Dean Ambrose, I can't be upset with my time in the WWE. You talk about the title runs that you guys were talking about, always towards the top of the card. He also met his wife there. I mean, it really doesn't get any better than that for him. So if he's going to take his 6 years there and move on somewhere else, I think he should be pretty proud of those 6 years that he had there.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know how much time Renee has left on her deal, but that's going to be interesting too. If he indeed
I can't see her going anywhere. Like they've just strapped a rocket to her back, and she's super incredibly important to the company. I can't see them shaking that up or having her go anywhere.
Yeah. And she's always had like offers outside of wrestling too.
ESPN was after.
Yeah, ESPN, and she chose to stay with WWE. So I mean, it's well publicized that she grew up a big fan too, and she wants to be part of it. And she stayed loyal to the company with outside offers. So I agree. I don't see her leaving anytime soon, or WWE giving her a reason to leave. So that'll be an interesting tangent on what happens with Dean. And I would say with the Dean Ambrose story, I believe right now it is legit because, like I was saying a little bit ago, they have been really open with the media in recent, way more than it used to be. I've been writing and covering wrestling for a long time on the internet, and WWE used to be super closed off from any of the, the so-called dirt sheets and the websites. And they're very open about communicating these days. If something happens, if I send a question to one of the PR guys, they get back to me like right away. And yeah, I got the same email that a lot of people did, and that are on their list that, he is going to be leaving once the report was out there and he's not re-signing and everything. So yeah, I don't know what the benefit is to confirming that to everyone, unless they think they're going to be able to re-sign him in the next 3 months and change his mind, and it spikes some interest in him and all of his television appearances in the next 3 months. Kyle?
I actually think the complete opposite. After listening to what you guys says, after listening to what both you guys said, do we just think that he's off TV now? I mean, because what Chris was saying, it's like, what benefit is it of announcing that? Because to me, I look at it, and if they keep putting him out on TV, the closer and closer it gets to the end of his deal, people are just going to be like, well, he's leaving. Mm-hmm. And we've seen in the past, they
turns into like the Brock Goldberg thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Where I was just thinking that, they, in WWE's mind, they're like, oh, it'll get heat on him as a heel. And usually it's just met with apathy because the crowd's like, well, I'm going to have no emotional investment past this match. So I'm wondering if he's just going to be written off TV and they're just going to sit out the rest of his deal.
That would make sense if that was actually the case. But,
unless they want to humiliate him and have him lose to like Nia Jax at WrestleMania.
But then he'll just walk out. I mean, why would he stick around to that?
Yeah.
Well, he's still under a contract for 3 months. I guess you're right. I guess he could just say, F it if it got real bad and he just forsakes, but I don't know how that works.
Now, there's a lot of talk about how this contract works. I know that there's usually some sort of a non-compete clause if you quit or you're released. But if his contract is up, does that mean that the next day he can go sign somewhere else?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know how that works either.
I think when the contract's up, you can negotiate. You just can't appear for him. So I think he could start negotiating, but that's a good question.
Do we think he's going to just re-sign somewhere immediately? Gonna go because, or is he just gonna
take time off?
Yeah, watch Netflix for like 6 months.
Now,
I might be doing that for the next 3 months anyway.
Yeah, that's true. I guess the contrarian view, Mr. Kyle Ross, to pull the other direction here, would be if you rewind to the pipe bomb was mentioned a little bit ago. CM Punk was evidently on his way out of the company. I don't remember the leaks happening this early that he was not going to re-sign, but he was put in that match with John Cena at Money in the Bank in Chicago, even though he was on his way out of the company, and he got so hot.
Everyone was under the impression he was leaving.
Yeah, and it spiked interest. He got really hot. They made him a good offer. He stuck around. So, who knows? There's different ways this could go, though.
Yeah, like I don't know, Dean could, maybe they just say, hey, the last few months have sucked and we just make him like a rebel or something. Maybe. Who knows? We'll see.
Yeah.
Like going back to what I was saying, what is more important to these guys? Is it saying you work with WWE and making a boatload of money? Or is it going to a Ring of Honor or an AEW or just going around the indies and being able to have creative control over whatever you want your character to be? Like it matters to some of these people. Like I talked to Gallows and Anderson on the weekend who haven't been used in forever. And they're just happy to be collecting a paycheck and hanging out with their family, I think.
Yeah, I'm so glad, Chris, you brought back to that because I wanted to follow that question up too. It's not apples to apples, the comparison. Present day wrestling to Monday Night Wars, WWF versus WCW, when those were the two main options for a big time worker in this country. But, there was the debate, as 1998, 1999, Chris Jericho, I think, was the one actually who started this. WCW was offering more money at the time, but guys were accepting less money to go work with WWF because they were so unhappy being stuck in the mid card with no upward mobility in WCW. So it's kind of interesting how that's come full circle, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. And we were talking about Ambrose and his matches and how hard it was to come to an agreement on what his best work was in WWE and not really having that classic match. I wonder what the turning point for him was, and if it was that Brock Lesnar match at WrestleMania, because wasn't that was a weapons match, right?
Yeah,
it seemed like set up for him to win, and he lost like pretty quickly.
I don't even think he got to use a weapon. I just think that was he was really hot. Because remember, he was working with Triple H. Didn't they did some network only show before that WrestleMania? It was like the first Roadblock, and he was the guy challenging Triple H for the title. He was the last guy in that Rumble that was for the title in 2016, and the crowd was pretty behind him. He was legitimately hot. And then guys have overcome bad booking before. That's something I always look for. When they're saying, "Oh, well, this guy," when I point something out to somebody, is this guy that good? Well, the booking sucks. I'm like, well, it's not like other guys don't overcome bad booking, but that was real bad. I mean, that was a thing where he just kind of was made to look weak. And then came that Jericho match, by the way, right after that I mentioned.
Yes.
Remember, what was that called? It was it was their take on that Clockwork House of Fun match.
Oh, yeah.
Remember, that was very bad with Mitch the Plant. Oh, that was.
Oh, yeah.
That was very bad.
I think I had kind of pressed that one out of my memory, but yeah.
What's interesting is right after that, when he's so cooled off, they put the title right before they did the brand split. He was the champion.
Yeah.
And he felt like kind of a mid-card champion in all due respect to Dean. But
yeah. Well, another guy that we had high hopes for about having a lot of classic matches in WWE when he came in, he was in a really publicized recruiting class in 2014, I believe, with Finn Balor, Prince Devitt at the time, Kevin Owens, and then you had Hideo Itami, who Tuesday night, that word just came out of nowhere that he's on his way out too. Asked for his release, was granted the release. Supposedly he finished up this week. He had a match on 205 Live, and that's it for him. So he'll have the 90-day no compete, which will leave him eligible to be on the Double or Nothing show in May. But when I look at Kenta's run as Hideo Itami in NXT and then on the main roster at 205 Live, that's one of the big what ifs in pro wrestling, because this is a guy who had so many great matches in Noah in Japan. And then he comes in and just injury. First he had the injury that kept him out over a year. Then he had another injury right after that. And he just never really caught on. And to me, that's kind of a depressing one to think of what could have been.
It's no one's fault in this situation why it didn't work out. The guy was injured. And by the time he was healthy enough, his best days were probably behind him in the ring, in large part due to injury, and B, they'd signed Nakamura. And Nakamura kind of passed him by in stature and was kind of like the new hot signing from Japan. So he was kind of in trouble. Get people who are like, oh, the W's they're letting another great one go. I mean, he did good work on 205 Live, but I mean, what are you gonna do with them, man? I mean, you're not gonna have him go over Buddy Murphy.
Well, and I think, unfortunately, your average fan, not someone who's watching every week, your average fan goes, who's Hideo Itami? He was so underutilized, even when he was healthy, that I don't think people are really going to, and I hate to say it, unfortunately, I don't think anyone's going to miss him because he was so underutilized. And you're absolutely right. It's the big what if. And if he goes somewhere else where he's given some freedom, maybe we could actually see some great matches out of him.
Yeah.
Because they granted the release, just you're cool. They're probably pretty confident he's not going AEW and he's just going to go back to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Which would be the smart move, I would think. Yeah. And WWE seems to have a real issue with guys who don't speak great English. And I get it. They're very promo driven with everything they do. Mm-hmm. And if you can't cut a great promo, it's like you're just immediately relegated to the mid card or lower because you can't drive a storyline.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting because I think Noah has different ownership now than when he left before. New Japan is going to be looking for some new talent unless they can get the agreement signed with AEW to share talent. They're definitely going to be looking for bringing in some big names. So that was going to be my next question is where do we see him going? I also think Japan most likely, but I don't know which company. So that'll be the big story over the next couple of weeks. So we saw, I kind of wanted to transition to WWE's booking for Elimination Chamber, first of all, and then kind of with WrestleMania on the horizon. where we see some of these stories going. So we saw TV this week with Rousey and Becky Lynch is obviously the money match for WrestleMania.
Ooh, baby, was that a strong segment?
Yeah. Well, Raw didn't. I mean, it didn't start out great. I think the crowd really threw Ronda off quite a bit, and she struggled a little bit. But then when Becky got out there and she really laid into Becky, she was just like lasered in, and it was awesome. And there, no question, that should be the main event at WrestleMania. But then you have the rumors about Charlotte being added to the match. So this is what I wanted to get into. Do you guys have a problem with Charlotte being added to the match? Would you rather see it a singles match? What's your opinion? We saw Charlotte attack Becky on Tuesday on SmackDown. And so they could either do a match early at Elimination Chamber and like get Charlotte out of the way and move on to the one-on-one match, or it could drag on and Charlotte's inserted in the triple threat. So Chris, what would you like to see at WrestleMania? A singles match or a triple threat match in this?
I always prefer a one-on-one singles match, but I can understand why, if they're going to have a historic match, and if it is going to be the main event at WrestleMania, the first ever women's main event at WrestleMania, I can understand why they'd want Charlotte to be involved in that. I can also understand from a storyline perspective that Becky Lynch shouldn't have even been in the Royal Rumble. And this bothers me so much. I'm such a logical person when it comes to wrestling. And Lana entered the Royal Rumble, and when the next person's number was called, Lana was then eliminated from the Royal Rumble. Why is it okay to have 31 entrants into the Royal Rumble just because Fit Finlay nodded his head? That makes zero sense. And the fact that that hasn't been addressed at all is completely ludicrous. So I think that maybe they tie in a storyline with Charlotte saying, hey, you shouldn't have even been in the Rumble. I should be the winner here. I should deserve this title match. That's where I'm coming from with this. I love that Becky won it. I love what she's doing right now. She's so over. That's incredible. But that booking was pretty weak at Royal Rumble. The fact that she taps out and then isn't even in the Royal Rumble and then takes this imaginary made-up spot and then wins it, I didn't like that at all.
I think they took for granted just how old, and she was over. I mean, so maybe I think they just, let me choose my words a little bit better. I think they just figured, she's going to be real over regardless of what we do. So let's just do this. That's what I think it was. And it's funny because it does work for that live audience or the people who are watching, week to week, which is obviously, virtually 100% of the people that were watching that show. But I had some buddies over who are not week to week viewers, and they were rather confused by the whole setup, how she just came in and everyone was fired. They're like, what? So could it have been done better? Probably. But I just think WWE figured, it's Becky. She's gold. We can do it at whatever. To answer Ryan's question, I too would prefer a one-on-one match. I think most people would. I mean, you watch that promo, man. They don't need anything else.
Yeah.
They don't. It would not anger me if they made it a triple threat because there are reasons. Chris talked about a lot of them. I think another one that I would add is, and we mentioned this last week, if Ronda's taking time off after Mania, and people know this, kind of hip to it, having another person in there, I guess, kind of muddies the water. Oh, is Becky, going to go over here or not? Are they going to have Charlotte? Because, WWE doesn't like to do the predictable thing, even though sometimes predictable is great. So that could be another reason they insert Charlotte. And local advertising here in Cleveland, Fastlane, is the final pay-per-view, the final stop on the road to WrestleMania, of course. They are advertising a Becky-Charlotte match for that right now. Now, obviously, card's subject to change, but that could be a deal where, Chris brings up, Charlotte's like, you weren't supposed to be in this match. They have a match. Charlotte beats her. They both are in. But let me bring this counterpoint up. What the heck do you do with Asuka and that title if you're putting both Becky and Charlotte in the Raw title match? Because that's kind of weird, two SmackDown people. I get that, and Charlotte's has the own issue with Rousey from Survivor Series, but you're moving your two top women from SmackDown over to the Raw side. What's left for Asuka? I think if Charlotte worked Asuka as the second women's title match, that'd be pretty good too. Yeah, it'd be even better if they didn't have Asuka tap clean as a sheet last year, but that's a different podcast for a different day.
Yeah, no, that is really interesting because they could move a Raw star over. I could see like Sasha or Alexa moving over to challenge Asuka maybe, but I was thinking about that too.
Maybe in the women's tag is probably gonna be the women's tag title.
Yeah. I was thinking that too. Like, would they do
Sasha
a Charlotte?
And Bayley are gonna win the tag titles.
Yeah. I was thinking that too. Like, would they do the Charlotte Asuka match again 2 years in a row? It was kind of a letdown last year for a lot of people. I mean,
it was a great match. I just, I think a lot of people, a lot of people, they're like, wow, that was pretty definitive, and kind of like you don't want to do a rematch at all. And this is, it's funny because WWE does especially with AJ Styles is kind of, I think, the most notable example. You get a lot of repeat matches on pay-per-view with AJ, and Charlotte Asuka is something I think we all assumed would be a kind of multi-show feud. And it, the way it was booked at Mania, it was clearly like, nope.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But give Vince credit. He listened to the fans and he's elevated Asuka. And as much as I didn't like the tap either, Chris, how Becky tapped clean, given that she's supposed to be the top face of the promotion, what was on pace. The flip side of that is, well, we all if they had it like kind of a cheap finish, we'd all be saying, well, they're making the SmackDown women's title look weak now because the finish did put Asuka over strong, at least.
Big time.
Yeah.
Yeah. During the Rumble on Sunday, me and Kyle and Justin, our usual co-host who's out ill tonight, we were texting, and there was a rumor out there Sunday night that Becky was going to win the men's Rumble. And as it went on, I saw that possibly happening because it seemed like everyone thought Charlotte was going to win the women's Rumble. And as we got to the end, I really thought it was going to happen, that Becky was going to take out R-Truth backstage and win the men's Rumble coming in at 30. So I didn't really foresee what happened with Lana. Of course, I didn't really watch the kickoff show, so I didn't know that she was injured and all that. But I don't know.
Nia ended up entering the Rumble, which was interesting, and also the first time we've seen any sort of intergender wrestling in years. You guys might know better than me. I don't know the last time we saw men wrestling women and actually not being afraid to put moves on them, because when Triple H was facing off against Ronda last year at Mania, he kind of gave the shrug of the shoulders, like, I can't hit you.
Mm-hmm.
Beth Phoenix was in a Rumble, maybe 2010.
Sure, yeah.
And I remember she eliminated the Great Khali by kissing him, and then but I think then Punk gave her the go to sleep and just tossed her.
Okay, but there was a time when we would have mixed tag matches, intergender matches, and men wrestled women all the time.
Sure.
Once again, with my wrestling logic here, it didn't make sense that Nia Jax can just take someone's spot, enter the Rumble. If we want equality for all, why can't Braun Strowman enter the women's Rumble then? I just don't. If I'm thinking from a logical standpoint here, why? If it's okay for women to enter the men's Royal Rumble, is it now okay logistically for men to enter the women's Rumble?
Yeah. That's true. It's a good point.
It just seems like an awful double standard.
Yeah.
Well, and when we kind of go over our thoughts on the Rumble and TakeOver cards, I think one of my more pointed criticisms of the Rumble matches, at least, they kind of repeated a lot of stuff between the two Rumbles, which is a troubling, because some people think. A lot of people raised this point last year when they announced the Women's Rumble. I know we were all happy, they're getting a Women's Rumble, but two Rumbles on the same show, is that overkill? That question is yet to be answered. But man, I don't like the idea of them repeating so much stuff in the two Rumbles on the same show. There were kind of Kofi tribute spots in the Women's Rumble. There were people hiding under the ring in both Rumbles. You had unscheduled people entering both Rumbles. So
these are really good points, Kyle. If you move the Women's Rumble to something like Evolution, then people go, well, it's not a Royal Rumble.
Yes, exactly.
It's not on the Royal Rumble card.
Yeah. That was a big discussion. I think the day after the Women's Rumble was announced, there were a lot of people saying, okay, this is cool, but man, is two Rumbles on the same show too much? And some people are like, oh, well, maybe you could do it on a different show. And a lot of people are like, man, the Royal Rumble has to be at the Royal Rumble, so
unless it's at the greatest Royal Rumble.
Yes, that is true. Yes, but we see this, throughout the year. Now we've got two chamber matches, by the way, coming up. There's two Money in the Bank matches. So
Yeah, I tend to think they should put more time between them. Like, I honestly think one of the Rumbles should open the show if they do two of them, because we saw with AJ and Bryan, that was kind of a death spot after the Women's Rumble.
Oh, that was the bathroom break spot in Phoenix. Good Lord. The line for the bathroom during that match was like 20 minutes long.
Well, because they had just watched a 72-minute match. I mean, I get the show had been running long, so, Meltzer brought this up. The show was already running long. Because he's like, man, they really need to do an intermission after that first Rumble. And that was my thought, too. Send it to the coach. Let's just,
that was the intermission. The intermission was that awful title match.
Yeah. But like an actual intermission where it's like, oh, let's get Shawn Michaels' take on the first half of the show, whatever. Because I actually thought about it and remembered this last year. This was a problem last year, too. People forget because the match wasn't as notable, but it was Rollins and Jordan worked the bar in the match after the Men's Rumble last year. And they actually were, to their credit, trying to go balls out and work a, spot kind of match. And the crowd just did not care. If you people want to go back and watch it. So that's something they've got to monitor moving forward, is whatever comes after that first Rumble is a absolute death spot. And they've got to do it where there's like an intermittent, I know they have a video package, but that one video package, you could tell was not enough for that live crowd. I mean, the crowd from the very start just was not into Bryan and AJ.
If everybody's watching this on the WWE network and we're not worrying about pay-per-view or putting this on network television or cable television, why do we need a pre-show? Why don't we just do the Royal Rumble? Like, I was there from 4 p.m. till 10 p.m. and it was exhausting. I mean, the only thing that's more exhausting is being at Mania for 8 or 9 hours. But it's like, why do we need a pre-show to a show that's on the exact same network?
Yeah. Or like when they cut to commercials for the WWE network as you're watching the WWE network.
But seriously, we could have started this thing. It could have been a 4-hour show, start to finish. You didn't need some of the pre-show stuff. And like you guys said, let's start with one of the Rumbles and then go from there.
Yeah, I actually think that is a good idea moving forward. They should just do one of the Rumbles first.
Yeah. Who would have ever imagined that AJ Styles and Daniel Bryan would be such a crappy match? Well, it's not even necessarily it was a bad match. It was just like the crowd wasn't into it. They worked a lot of slow rest holds.
Yeah,
like
and
we were talking about.
They should have called an audible in that match. And those are two smart workers in the ring. Yeah. They should have called. I mean, to me, you could tell about 2 or 3 minutes into that match that the crowd wasn't buying what they were selling, and they should have called an audible and just done a spot fest. And the match didn't need to be, and the thing was, you can tell this now in modern wrestling. When guys start working a match like that, you can tell it's going to go long. And I just think the crowd didn't want the long match in that spot. And given the finish they did with Rowan, it didn't need to be long.
Yeah. That Finn Balor and Brock Lesnar match was the perfect length of time for everything that we had endured as a live crowd that night.
Yeah. And that's another thing that was worked. So of the 2 title matches that people knew were coming, Finn and Brock, I think, was the one, it sounds like it's certainly in the building, but I know that probably most people watching were more looking forward to. So that was working against AJ and Daniel Bryan. And also, that was their 4th time working on TV since October 30th, people. Again, we've talked about this, Ryan, how many times with AJ matches that, it's a lot of the repeats with AJ. He worked Nakamura 3 times on pay-per-view. We worked Joe 3 times. When it's a babyface challenger that the crowd doesn't buy as winning, that really hurts that scenario. And I think that's something else to consider why the match didn't get over.
Yeah. Yeah, when we look at the Rumble just top to bottom, we had 7 matches, including the 2 Rumbles. And
not including pre-show, though.
Not including the pre-show, yeah. So when we went to rank those, I thought the Women's Rumble was the worst match on the show, bar none. And then I had the Men's Rumble next at number 6.
You were very fired up. I think you need to open the curtain a little bit. You were very upset about this show on Sunday night.
Well,
January 27th.
I didn't like the Rumbles. And so for me, like when we were talking about, was it a good show or a bad show? It's hard. Like, yeah, the undercard was good. It's hard for me to call it like a good show when both Rumbles were disappointing. I thought both Rumbles just were not that good. But the rest of the card was pretty good outside of AJ and Bryan.
it was very much the reverse of last year. I think last year the consensus was everyone loved both Rumbles, but that undercard wasn't exactly, one of the finest of our generation. So I can understand the disappointment, especially if you're someone who evaluates a Rumble, puts a little extra stock in the actual Rumble matches. But, to me, and look, I told you last week, my expectations were sky high for this show. Mm-hmm. And did it hit them? No, it didn't. But that doesn't mean it's a bad show. I think the majority of the non-Rumble stuff was actually pretty good, with the exception of Bryan AJ. I think, Brock and Finn was very good. Asuka and Becky was very good, and then Sasha and Ronda was very good as well.
Yeah, I'd say 4 of the 7 matches were very good. 3 didn't hit it for me. So I guess if I was going good, bad, or in the middle, it's in the middle for me.
Yes.
What it came down to was, if I'm picking the best match, bar none, it's the 2 women's title matches. And I went back and forth. I'm going to go to you guys in a second what you thought the best match of the Rumble was. I ended up going with Ronda and Sasha, just barely above Asuka and Becky, because I liked the aftermath so much, and what they did after the bell. That kind of that put it over the top for me. But I think those 2, bar none, those 2 matches were the top 2 matches on the Rumble. And then I had the tag title match number 3, and then Brock Finn. Those 2 I could go either way on, honestly. I kind of made a joke out of it last week on the show here. I brought out the Balor Club shirt. We were doing our predictions. I'm like, oh, maybe there's a chance Finn Balor will win and they'll throw off Mania and just change it up. I was trying to make the show interesting. If you go back and watch it on YouTube, I added the Finn Balor theme music. I very dramatically put on not really dramatically. It took me a little while to do it, but I put on the Balor Club shirt. Didn't get it done, but I thought the match was entertaining. They teased that he might get the win.
Yeah. I like that match a lot. If he came out as the Demon, I think that he had a chance to win, which, I mean, this is a conversation for another time, but what happens to Finn now? He has this very good match at the Rumble, and now Seth Rollins is going to face the Beast. So what happens to Finn?
Well, it looks like Lashley. What a poser this guy is, too. This guy's unbelievable. They teased that on Raw. That looks to be something that would happen at the Chamber, we think. And Ryan, what have I been saying on this program for months?
Yep.
I know that the Finn diehards have higher expectations and will get dirty diapers over this, but the IC title is a wonderful place for Finn.
I agree. I've said that on the show many times, that I think he'd be a great Yes, I have. That he would be a great Intercontinental Champion. I've said it before on this program as well. I think it's a good spot for him.
My biggest problem with the Rumble in general, and I agree, both Rumble matches were okay. They were all right. And I agree with Kyle that a lot of stuff was repeated. I hate that we knew who number 30 was in both Rumbles. That should be the surprise entrant. John Cena in the past, Roman Reigns recently. That should be the surprise entrant. Not this just throwaway spot you're just going to give to Carmella and R-Truth that no one cares about, that R-Truth didn't even get to walk halfway to the ring. I had a real problem with that.
Okay, I know no one really watched it, and probably even fewer care. But with the whole mixed match challenge 2 thing, and he kind of what the light bulb went off when he's like, Truth didn't even come up. Man, was that a whole lot of nothing. I know there were a lot of injuries, but I just feel bad. They didn't even show any of those segments of them going to Stanford on TV, did they? You just had to go to the website, I think, to watch
pictures of it or something.
Yeah. I thought for sure, I was like, okay, a lot of people were rolling their eyes when they won that match at TLC, but I'm like, they do some vignettes on TV. Maybe this act gets over. And we didn't get nothing. Although Truth is now the United States champion. So
Facebook must be paying WWE a just boatload of money for all this mixed match challenge stuff that really, for the most part, not a ton of people are watching.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with number 30 is always like the anticipated moment in the Rumble, and it really takes away to know that, R-Truth is coming out,
Right.
The new U.S. champion, I might add.
Yeah,
R-Truth. So go ahead, Kyle.
I was just saying my top matches were actually it was neck and neck between Becky and Asuka and Finn and Brock, actually. I actually had Ronda and Sasha's third, not a distant third, but third. And then then there was kind of a huge drop off to the rest of the card. I did think both Rumble matches in the pantheon of Rumbles were subpar. Bryan and AJ obviously was not good. And that tag match, it was entertaining, but
I enjoyed that tag match.
Yeah, but I had one major gripe, and I think it's legitimate. MMA Shane is not something I care to be seeing on my television screen. I mean, I had a buddy, big fan of the show, Chad, who I've referenced before, who would get violently ill when the Undertaker would be trading submissions with Brock Lesnar.
Yeah.
Man, Shane, that triangle choke that Shane had on Cesaro may have been the low point of grappling in this country.
Jesus.
It wasn't great.
Yeah. Chris, how'd you rank them?
I'm with you guys on that. Both women's title matches I thought were very good. Finn and Brock was surprisingly my expectations for that match were not high. And I thought the storytelling in that match was the best storytelling we saw all night, actually. I obviously didn't hear the commentary. I haven't watched the Rumble other than being there live. But Brock going into the announce table, in the corner of the announce table, I thought that was really good storytelling. And for them to tease a Finn victory, and then give it to Brock, I thought was great. And it leads into what we're going to end up seeing down the line, which I think one day, eventually, Heyman's going to end up turning on Brock and putting someone over.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Could see that too.
Finn attacked his diverticulitis.
That's right. He did.
NXT TakeOver. Just real quickly, how we rank those matches. By the way, spoiler alert, if you don't want to hear what has happened at tapings this week, fast forward a few minutes. But we had I rated number 1, the Johnny Gargano Ricochet match, and Gargano won the North American title, right? And then promptly dropped it to the Velveteen Dream.
Or did he? Because
did he?
Yeah, there's been some conflicting reports with that they taped 2 finishes. And
really? I did not see that.
Yeah. So people don't know what's going on with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds like Dream went over, and then Johnny's walking to the back, and then went back in the ring and tapped Dream out. So we don't know if that was
and left
Johnny
with the title.
Revenge, or and he left with the title. So we don't know if that's Johnny getting revenge and going, "This is my title, you can't have it," or if that was actually them taping a different finish and swerving the audience.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, I thought that was the best match at TakeOver. I thought, yeah, definitely great match. Ciampa, Aleister Black, I had number 2. Then I had the women's match, Baszler and Belair, which was good. And then I had the War Raiders and Undisputed Era. And then I thought the Matt Riddle Cassius Ohno match was very underwhelming. And we've been really high on Matt Riddle on this program many, many times, but that match was just kind of blah for me. Kyle?
I have a very strong feeling on what was the weakest match on this show. It was the main event by far. I thought was the weakest match on the show. I don't think it was close. And I think compared to most people, I didn't have a clear pecking order among the first 4. I thought they were all kind of pretty close bunched together. I think based on what you just said, I liked Riddle and Ohno better than you did. I probably do not like Gargano Ricochet as much as other people did. Meltzer I saw gave it 4 3/4 stars. The Observer, that's too high. It's I don't mean to be a dick, but I'm going to say this because he's like you unparalleled storytelling, unparalleled all this. Isn't it fair? And this is going to sound like a downgrade, and it's not, because it was a good match. It was a really good match, but. I watched that match and I'm like, man, I feel like this is like watching a cruiserweight match from Thunder, but it just has a lot of heat now in terms of the move set and the way it's worked, where it's that super indie style. Mm-hmm. I know that's a real crowd pleaser right now. And it's unique, it's the only match that was worked like that. And I'll come back to my point on the main event in a second, but I did not think that was like a match of the year candidate. Even though I came across really impressed with Ricochet actually in that. As much as I like Johnny Gargano, but at the same time, part of the problem for me is I hate this story. I've brought this up so many times. I hate what they've done with Gargano's character over the last 9 months. I just don't think it's good. And it makes me kind of not anticipate his matches now just as much. But with that main event, the problem was with it first 4 matches were all unique. I thought you had kind of the opener kind of was worked in a Texas Tornado style, old school, where it was just, there weren't a lot of tags. It was just 4 guys going balls out. Riddle Ono was a fight. Loved the ref stoppage finish. That was unique. Gargano Ricochet, we talked about the super indie style, is a real crowd pleaser. And then, Belair and Baszler just kind of felt like a fight, which is good. The women often do better than the men these days. And by the time we got to that main event, it was too long, way too long. And it just didn't present anything unique that the first 4 didn't. So I thought it was by far the weakest match on the show, and kind of a disturbing trend with these takeovers where these main events, they go too long, man, I think, and are often towards the weaker part of the show. It's almost like the same people who were involved in 2003, 2004 Raw are involved with NXT. I don't know. It's kind of weird. Are you getting that sense that those same people are involved there, or what?
They are. Yes, they are. I'm shocked that you like the Riddle match that much, honestly.
Yeah, I'm also shocked that you like the Riddle match that much. Cassius Ohno is not the worker that Chris Hero once was.
He has not. Okay, you talk about a guy who hasn't been utilized right since he came out. I mean, God, this guy had just one of the great indie runs in 2016, and they kind of just brought him in and typecast him as as a put other guys over guy. Basically, his character going into that match is what he had been typecast at in reality. Yeah. You're going to put over. When we bring somebody new in and we're going to shoot them to the top of the card, they're going to beat you.
Yeah.
I had Ricochet and Johnny at the top of my list for sure, and I think that anything that came after that was going to pale in comparison, because that match for me had everything. And I love that they let those guys work that NXT, that indie style that you're describing, Kyle. Because if those 2 guys fought at the Royal Rumble, you wouldn't see that same type of match. I love that they allow them to work that stiffer style, that faster style. That Riddle Ono match would be at the opposite end of the spectrum for me. I just was not impressed with that match, and I haven't been impressed with Cassius Ono since he came into NXT. I think that he's completely underutilized. He's very talented, and he just hasn't had the chance to really showcase his skills. I didn't think the title match was as bad as you're saying, Kyle. I think it sets up an interesting story at the end of the show, that's for sure. Although we haven't talked about it at all. We have Halftime Heat. Halftime Heat is back because of what happened at the end of NXT.
That is a hoot. Yes,
that's true.
We should see like an empty arena match. Remember that?
Oh yeah.
So I'm very much with you, Ryan. Where the other 4 matches I think were they were great. Or Kyle, you said that the War Raiders match was just fantastic, and I'm excited to see. All the matches on that card were very, very good, and arguably better than a lot of what we saw the next night.
Yeah, I think NXT had the better show yet again, which probably no surprise at this point.
You don't
think so, Kyle?
No, it was better. I don't think the gap was quite as big as some people think it is these days. To me, they're a lot closer. Survivor Series weekend, I thought Survivor Series was better than TakeOver War Games.
Now, I did think Survivor Series weekend there was an argument to be made,
because I did not like that War Games match.
Yeah,
if the WWE pay-per-views were the same length as NXT, I think we'd be enjoying them a lot more. But that is seriously a big problem now that WWE needs to figure out. These pay-per-views are way too long.
Yeah. I often try to convince my wife to watch these shows with me. She's not a wrestling fan, but sometimes I can get her watch the women's matches with me. And when I told her Central Time that this show was going to like 11 o'clock, she's like, "You got to be kidding me! There's that much time left on this show." Like if you're just trying to get into wrestling and you think about 3 hours of Raw, 2 hours of SmackDown, NXT, these long paper, like it is a big commitment to get into these shows. So that is they do need to condense it a lot, I think, too.
A lot of the issues that people complain about WWE, I've always said it's macro issues. People want to make everything into micro issues. Specific, about Dean Ambrose, certain things they do. It's macro issues, like Chris said. The length of the pay-per-views is an issue.
Yeah,
and like you said, with that much TV, I mean, Raw. There are good Raws. I thought Raw was actually pretty good last Monday, but. A 3 hour Raw, man, just that consistently makes it hard to be good week after week.
Yeah. No, when they moved it to 3 hours, I went, man, that's 2 hours at that time. I mean, we're always, as wrestling fans, extremely critical. At 11:05 Eastern time when Raw ends, we all go, well, that sucked. And then you kind of think about it throughout the week and you go, oh, actually, this match wasn't so bad.
Yeah, it's funny. People have podcasts and have writing deadlines, and I think they're mad that they're staying up late. I really think that legitimately does kind of, make people overly critical.
Well, I think that, it's the same thing with like when someone goes, I had a terrible day. Well, did you have a bad day or did you have a bad 5 minutes? And I think it's the same with Raw. Like you have 1 or 2 bad matches and it ruins the rest of the show. Or on the flip side, you can have one incredible match and you go, oh, Raw was great this week. Like, people think they're very nostalgic about the Attitude Era. And there was a lot of great stuff back then. But you also forget that like Naked Midian was running around back then. There's a lot of garbage going on.
Yeah. It's I will say I did enjoy Raw and SmackDown this week quite a bit. To me, one of the highlights was Daniel Bryan's new championship belt.
Yes.
And that Joe promo, baby.
Joe, that's an interesting point. Because
he's a top 5. He is easily a top 5 promo in that company.
Oh yeah.
He may be in the discussion for number 1.
Yeah, we're gonna have to get in this on a future show because we're running short on time here, and I want to keep Chris all night. But I wanted to talk a little bit about WrestleMania direction. We'll get into this in the weeks ahead. But and we know Seth and Brock are going to be wrestling for the Universal title now, and so if Bryan makes it out of the Elimination Chamber with the belt, like where do they go for him at Mania? And it's like, man, Samoa Joe is right there, but they don't. Joe's, technically kind of a heel, but he's almost like the cool heel now where people are going to start cheering him because he is so good on the mic. So I wonder if they would go that route just because Joe is kind of becoming the cool heel, like I said. But I don't know if you guys foresee any direction with Bryan for WrestleMania. That's kind of my last topic for tonight. But that's something that I've had running through my mind a lot in the last couple of days is where do they go with that SmackDown championship match? Chris, what are your thoughts?
Well, I was really hoping to see Daniel Bryan versus The Miz, and I was hoping to finally see that payoff here. Obviously, now that he's the tag team champion with Shane, that's probably not going to happen, and that'll be, a match at Mania, I think. Shane and Miz, I would see still being the champion at that time. Joe and Bryan makes the most sense right now, but it's still January right now, so we've still got a couple months. I also can't see. Can you imagine if Joe wins the title at Mania and he's standing on the top rope or posing in the middle of the ring with the sustainable title, like the hemp title? It's just, what kind of WrestleMania moment is that?
Yeah.
Or whoever ends up, if someone beats Daniel Bryan, I can't see someone else holding up that title.
That's funny. Yeah,
that's so weird.
It's funny because like on Twitter and stuff, everyone this week was talking about like you got to make the replicas of that title. I want it because the belt's so cool. And the irony is that if they do make replicas of that title, it goes against everything Bryan's saying on TV. So then they could do something where he's like confiscating them at the merchandise stands or something every night.
Funny.
Yeah, it would be pretty funny. But I love the belt. It actually looks really good. So Kyle, what do you think about Bryan's WrestleMania direction?
I'll lean on what I said on last week's show, the idea I had with him and Cena.
Oh, yeah.
If they want to make it important, Cena's, he's the guy, because they obviously, there's Fastlane, I guess. I was going to say, because I don't know how they're going to establish the contender. Assuming Bryan retains in the chamber, I don't know how you establish that contender. And Cena's a character, obviously, you don't really need to establish as a contender. You can just come up with a storyline, and the storyline's there with Total Bellas.
Yeah.
So I like that idea. Other than that, I don't know. I don't know what they do with it.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting discussion we're going to have.
I never thought I would be saying this, but don't want to see more Bryan v. AJ in a one-on-one scenario.
Same.
Not after the Rumble.
No.
Yeah.
Their first match, by the way, if people missed it, it was the one when Bryan jobbed clean right before Crown Jewel. I hate saying job, like I'm like saying that in a bad way. Tap clean. That was probably the best main roster match of 2018, by the way. It was on the SmackDown. I remember Meltzer was saying, that he thought the TLC match was, and I disagree. I think every match has actually been a little bit worse.
Interesting. I need to go back and watch that. I remember covering that match for Comic Book, but
the key is no tropes. Like all the things that you expect from a WWE match, they didn't do them. They did not do one near fall in that match. Not one.
Wow.
I appreciate that stuff, as you know.
Interesting. Well, let's take it home, guys. It's been a good show, entertaining show. Chris,
Great.
Thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, man, thank you guys.
Yeah, where can the listeners find you? Get your publicity out there for
Oh,
us.
thank you. Yeah, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. It's just my name, Chris Van Vliet, Vanvliet, and that is how you pronounce it. By the way, I hear some other podcasts will pick up clips from my interviews and call me Chris Van Vliet or Chris Van Violet or whatever you want to call me. Yeah, Chris. Oh, yeah, he's from Canada. It must be French. Chris Van Vliet. So thank you guys for pronouncing it correctly, and thanks for hanging out. It's
Awesome,
always
man.
great to talk with fellow wrestling fans.
Oh yeah, definitely. Hopefully we can get you on again in the future. It's good, good
Anytime.
conversation.
I'd love to.
I was going to say, you're not related to Fred Van Vliet, huh? I know one of Ryan's old rivals in the Missouri Valley Conference.
Yeah, Wichita State Shockers. That's
No,
right.
he spells it slightly differently.
Oh, that's right. He is a double E. He's a double E.
Yeah, I wish I was. Mine would be much easier to pronounce then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a
Mine's
Northern
spelled the
Iowa
same as-
graduate, Chris. So the Wichita State
Oh.
Shockers were my our rivals here in college.
My apologies.
Yeah. So Kyle, any parting words?
I just can't wait to, walk out of this room and find out, what latest move AEW has done to take over the wrestling world.
Yes.
You've never seen a wrestling company like this before.
No,
Literally.
I haven't.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, thanks
Where
for
the big
tuning
boys
in.
play, AEW,
Yes.
baby.
They're gonna have to have a slogan like that or something. We'll have to see what they come up with. And that's a whole nother thing. God, we didn't even talk about that. I see you doing it on the video down there. Shinsuke Nakamura. Do you see his tweet? WCW after SmackDown? Who knows, man? I don't know. This has been a crazy year in professional wrestling.
And we're only 1 month in.
That's right. All right. Well, you can find Kyle at TRP Kyle. I am at Historical Ryan on Twitter. The podcast is at Top Rope Nation. Like I said at the beginning, if you could subscribe on YouTube, if you like the show, we would appreciate it. Subscribe on all the podcasting platforms. We're at topropenation.com. And we will be back with episode 84 next week. Justin Joint, hopefully, will be feeling a little better. He'll be joining us again. We'll be talking about all the latest news in pro wrestling. Thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend.